Elephants are a group of animals that require no explanation. Titans of the living world, they're renowned all over. These creatures belong to a group of mammals known as Proboscidea, which evolved around 60 million years ago, not too long after the death of the non-avian dinosaurs. Ever since their inception, they've evolved into a series of weird and wacky forms, eventually leading to our modern species today. And while extant elephants represent only a fraction of the expansive Proboscidean family, they're still a fascinating group in their own right. So today we'll cover the members of the two living genera of elephants. All modern elephants fall under the family Elephantidae. This group evolved at the end of the Miocene epoch in Afro-Arabia from the Gomphotheres. The Gomphotheres were a varied assortment of proboscideans, oftentimes with strange appearances. This is no more clear than with the genus thought to have given rise to Elephantidae, Tetralophodon, a 4-tusked, 10-ton giant found in Africa, Europe, and Asia. The peculiarities of this animal persisted even to the earliest elephantids, such as Stegotetrabelodon, an African and Middle Eastern Miocene genus that also had 2 pairs of tusks. This genus, however, was only sister to the line that's irrelevant to us today, the subfamily Elephantinae. Prime Elephas is among the earliest genera found here, and represents a morphological midpoint between the Gomphotheres and modern elephants. This genus also possessed a pair of lower tusks, though these are greatly reduced compared to those of earlier Gomphotheres like Tetralophodon and its fellow elephantid Stegotetrabelodon. But where it saw a decrease in its lower tusks, Prime Elephas saw an increase in the number of ridges on its molars, a trait that will be crucial in terms of grinding up hardier plant material. This type of dentition is one that's characteristic of Elephantidae. These ridges, or lophs, were fairly broad, but became narrower and more numerous in subsequent elephantids. And as you're probably aware, lower tusks also disappeared in these later genera. And so long as we're discussing differentiating features in Elephantidae, we can also mention the differences in their legs. Elephantids are known for possessing slender limbs positioned directly underneath their body in a columnar fashion. These are known as more graviporal limbs, that is, limbs articulated in a way to support the massive weight of these animals. It's interesting to note that this particular feature isn't exclusive to just Elephantidae. The family Dinotheridae also convergently evolved these features, present in animals such as Dinotherium of Africa and Eurasia. For earlier non-elephantids, their less graviportal limbs meant that they had to compensate with thicker bones as well as heavier leg musculature in order to support themselves. The first branch-off point in the evolution of the elephantids takes place shortly after the family's appearance in the late Miocene. This divergence includes the genus Loxodonta, the earliest known species of which is Loxodonta cookae, an elephant that would have lived in sub-Saharan Africa in countries such as Uganda and Tanzania. This genus had fossils that dated back to around 7 to 5 million years ago. Unfortunately, we know very little about this species, as all we have of it are teeth. Perhaps in life it would have resembled extant African elephants, and has in many illustrations been depicted as such. From here we see a fairly direct progression from the Miocene to the Pliocene for the genus, with Loxodonta exopata, the next distinguishable species, leading to Loxodonta atlantica, a species larger than today's African bush elephant, but one that's speculated to have directly evolved into that very species. When this happened isn't exactly known. The earliest fossils of the African bush elephant, Loxodonta africana, date back to around the middle of the Pleistocene, roughly 800 to 200,000 years ago in Ethiopia, but we just don't have enough evidence to assume that that was when the species first evolved outright. What we do know is that Atlantica and Africana did coexist for a period before Atlantica died out 400,000 years ago. And look, if I'm being thorough, I might as well bring up Loxodonta adorara, a Pliocene species believed by some researchers to be the actual antecedent to Africana. This has been disputed though, with some scientists even suggesting this species to be the same as Exopata. I totally get that these elephants might be blurring together for some of you, so let's just simplify things with this little diagram here to keep things easier to understand. Of course, it's hard to keep things simple when you consider the other modern species under Loxodonta. You'll notice that up to this point, I've been conveniently not talking about the African forest elephant, Loxodonta cyclotis, and that's for good reason. This guy's taxonomy and evolutionary history is a bit of a mess. Maybe mess is too strong of a word, but it's definitely not as clean-cut as what I explained with Africana. The forest elephant was initially believed to have been a simple subspecies of the bush elephant. That makes well enough sense, given that aside from being substantially smaller, the forest elephant bears extreme morphological similarities to its savanna-dwelling cousin. Later phylogenetic analyses, however, uncovered that forest and bush elephants actually diverged as early as 1.9 to almost 7 million years ago, though that upper ballpark has, in more recent studies, been reduced to a more conservative 5 million years. This reveals two things. Number one, that even at a roughly 2 million year divergence, that 800,000 BC date for Loxodonta africana evolution might be farther off from the truth than expected. And 2, that with such a great time since divergence, many scientists can in fact classify the forest elephant as its own species. So far, this seems relatively straightforward. What makes things difficult, however, comes down to another genus of elephant entirely, known as Paleoloxodon, colloquially called the straight-tusked elephants. You might know them from Paleoloxodon pneumaticus, arguably the biggest land mammal to have ever existed, or Paleoloxodon falconeri, an island-dwelling elephant and one of the smallest proboscideans. Initially, the Paleoloxodon genus was grouped together with modern Asian elephants due to its morphological similarities, but a recent genetic analysis has placed them closer to those elephants under Loxodonta. In fact, recent research on Loxodonta cyclotis shows quite a bit of mitochondrial DNA from Paleoloxodon. This has led many to wonder just how close the relationship actually extended. A 2018 study done by Palkopoulou and colleagues aimed to investigate this among many other elephantid relationships. This involved taking samples from both living elephants as well as many fossil species such as the woolly and Columbian mammoths, and of course one from Paleoloxodon, this species being Paleoloxodon antiquus. I'll post a link to the article so you guys can read up on the methodology of the study, but to keep things short, the results indicate that Paleoloxodon represented a distinct but closer lineage of elephants sister to Loxodonta, and specifically, it's far more related to the forest elephant than to the bush elephant. This whole tree nicely parallels another set of elephant genera that we'll discuss later in the video. As far as the presence of Paleoloxodon mitochondrial DNA, that could have just been the result of Paleoloxodon antiquus getting freaky in the forest, which is a crude way of saying that this was probably due to hybridization between Paleoloxodon and Loxodonta cyclotis. And Paleoloxodon itself likely originated from a hybridization not just from forest elephants, but with other animals such as mammoths as well. This research is supported by Haifeng Lin and colleagues in 2023, who supplement the relationship between cyclotis and Paleoloxodon with several Chinese specimens as well. Now again, like I mentioned, the exact relationships are still a bit murky, but the sister lineage idea seems to be the most accurate view between these two genera for now. And both studies are linked in the description below if you guys want to take a look. But that's enough phylogeny. For now, let's discuss the similarities and differences between the African bush and African forest elephants. We might as well start off with the environments of these two elephants, since they're pretty much given away in their names. The forest elephant obviously inhabits tropical rainforest, found in Central and West Africa. The African elephant, on the other hand, has a far larger range, being found across sub-Saharan Africa. While it's best known for inhabiting savanna regions, it's also known to live in forests and even deserts. The historic range of both of these species has been far larger, especially with the bush elephant, where it can be found as far north as Egypt. Unfortunately, pressures from humans have led to a reduction in the countries and regions in which these animals could be found. Just at a glance, we can see that these two animals share the same general body plan, a large, robust body with a flat back and broad ears. These ears, many say, are shaped similarly to the continent of Africa. That said, the ears of Cyclotis are a bit smaller and more compact, since the larger size of Africana's ears help in regulating body temperature in their hotter environments. When it comes to dentition, the most distinguishable aspect of this genus comes down to the structure of its molars. In bush and forest elephants, these form thin rhombuses known as lozenges. This is actually how the genus got its name, with Loxodonta meaning lozenge tooth. Now, just as an aside, but can we take some time to appreciate how unbelievably lame that name is? Like, this is a genus that contains the biggest land animal on the planet, and we're gonna give it the same name as something the school nurse would send me back to class with instead of just letting me go home? Now, I get that a lot of animals are named after the structure of their teeth, for example the mastodons, but at least Nippletooth works as a conversation starter. I'm just saying, man, Afro Titan's still on the table if we ever want to consider a name change. But lame name or not. Nippletooth. But lame name or not, the structure of these guys' molars still make them ideal for grinding up food. Another difference comes in the form of the tusks of these two species. In African bush elephants, these can grow up to giant sizes of about 3.51 meters or 11 feet 6 inches in curve. The largest undisputed tusk for the forest elephants measures in at a comparatively smaller 2.41 meters or about 7 foot 11 inches. These tusks are far straighter than their savanna counterparts. Moving onto the legs of these animals, forest elephants have rounder feet, with 5 toenails in their front feet and 4 in their back, compared to bush elephants which have 4 in their front and 3 in their back. But let's talk about the big difference between these animals, that is, their size. Bush elephants measure 2.5 to 4 meters at the shoulder, or 8.2 to 13 feet, and weigh in anywhere from 2,268 to 6,350 kilograms, or 5,000 to 14,000 pounds. But the largest African bush elephants on record can get even larger. One 13-meter-tall individual weighed around 24,000 pounds. The African forest elephant, by comparison, is a far smaller animal. The elusiveness of the species has made proper measurements difficult, but recent estimates have this animal being as tall as no more than 2.75 meters, or 9 feet, and weighing 3.5 tons, or around 7,700 pounds. These two elephant species are similar in that they're both browsers and grazers, feeding on everything from grasses, bark, to fruit, but the amount of food is different between them given their size and environments. Forest elephants don't eat nearly as much as the up to 300 pounds of food every day that bush elephants eat. Their roles as ecosystem engineers are also slightly different. Bush elephants can reshape their environment by knocking down trees and digging up sources of water, a behavior that can benefit many species around them. And while forest elephants are certainly capable of doing this too, they're also known to benefit their environment through means of seed dispersal. This has helped increase the spread and health of various plant species across places such as the Congo. Let's now shift from Loxodonta onto the other extant genus of elephants, Elephas. This genus is best known for housing the Asian elephant, but is actually quite closely related to the mammoths as well. As mentioned before, this puts a neat parallel between our extant African and Asian elephants, as well as the two most iconic genera of the Pleistocene, Paleoloxodon and Mammothus. But Elephas split off from the mammoths around 6 to 7 million years ago. Despite Elephas being associated with Asia today, the earliest known member of this genus, Elephas echorensis, actually evolved in Africa during the Pliocene, 5 to 4.2 million years ago. As for the oldest genus that actually inhabited Asia, that would be the late Pliocene Elephas planifrons, found on the Indian subcontinent with potential spread into Southeast Asia. There's a bit of debate surrounding these two species' placement within Elephas, especially in the former, with some researchers pointing out a lack of similarities with future Elephas species, and its teeth bearing similarities instead to Loxodonta adarara. That said, the pattern of an African origin followed by Asian dispersal is one scientists generally agree upon for this genus, with the early Pleistocene Elephas Hysudracus thought to have been the progenitor of our modern elephant species, Elephas maximus. Asian elephants are generally smaller than the African bush elephant, while being larger than the African forest elephant. In terms of morphological differences, they have the highest point of their body at the top of their head, and have sloped backs and foreheads marked by twin bulges. Additionally, their trunk only has a single tip, compared to the two present on African species. This means that rather than being able to pick up items with the tip itself, they have to resort to wrapping the body of their trunk around food or other objects. As a consequence, this has led to their trunk being extremely dexterous. Asian elephants have 5 toenails on their front feet and 4 on their back, similar to African forest elephants. Tusks in these elephants are generally only present in males, with females oftentimes possessing a tush, which are little baby tusks. The molars of this elephant are also far rounder and elliptical than the more rhomboid-looking cheek teeth of the Loxodonta genus, though as with most elephantids, they serve the same process of grinding food efficiently. Another difference comes in the form of their ears, which are smaller and rounder than those of their African relatives. And just as the ears of Loxodonta resemble the continent that they're from, so too do the ears of the Asian elephant, often simply called the Indian elephant, look like that very country.
Again, it's like poetry, so if they rhyme.
But much like other animals commonly called Indian, this elephant isn't restricted solely to the central country of the subcontinent, and has populations all over South, East, and Southeast Asia. Due to the extremely varied geographical nature of this area of Asia, the Asian elephant can be found in a variety of habitats. These include tropical and subtropical forests, grasslands and savannas, and even higher altitude, more mountainous regions, particularly with those populations living near the Himalayas. But the historic range of this species was even greater, ranging from the western end of China all the way to the eastern end of the Middle East. Asian elephants have been an important part of many old world cultures, used for transport and warfare. But just like with the African elephant species, human hunting and encroachment has drastically reduced the range of this species across the continent. These elephants are known to form herds and share the mix of browsing and grazing that's common to the Loxodonta genera, consuming stupid amounts of food each day. And much like African elephants, Asian elephants are also ecosystem engineers, clearing paths and dispersing seeds as they live and go about their day-to-day lives. The Asian elephant has 3 extant subspecies that are generally recognized. The first of these is what's actually the Indian elephant, Elephas maximus indicus. These are most commonly found in India, but can also be found elsewhere in South Asia such as Nepal and Bangladesh, Southeast Asia and Thailand, Laos, Cambodia, among other countries, and even has a small population in China. The Indian elephant is the second largest subspecies, with males being heavier, measuring 2.75 meters or 9 feet tall, and 4,000 kilograms or 8,800 pounds. At higher ends, they can go up to over 11 feet at the shoulder and weigh 11,900 pounds, or about 5,400 kilograms. But the largest of the Asian elephants are just south of India, on the island of Sri Lanka. The Sri Lankan elephant, Elephas maximus maximus, can grow up to 3.5 meters or 11.5 feet at the shoulder and measure 5,500 kilograms or 12,100 pounds. But while the sizes of these elephants are formidable, what's less impressive is that only 5 to 10% of the males in this subspecies possess tusks. This could be due to the pressures of killing males for their tusks, and so subsequent generations had fewer and fewer members which actually bore them. Sri Lankan elephants also have greater levels of depigmentation over their body and trunk. This can often lead to large splotches of pink on some individuals, which in my opinion makes them look really cool. The Sumatran elephant, Elephas maximus sumatranus, is the smallest of the Asian elephant subspecies, only found on the Indonesian island of Sumatra. This elephant can measure up to 3.2 meters or about 10.5 feet, but can be as short as 6'7". For reference, my middle school math teacher was 6'9", which was always crazy to me, but now even crazier that he might give an elephant some insecurity about his height. These elephants also range in size from an upper end of 4,000 kilograms or 8,800 pounds to a lower end of 2,000 kilograms or 4,400 pounds. Now those are the three widely accepted subspecies of Asian elephants, but there's one more that I want to discuss, and that's the Bornean elephants. As the name suggests, these animals are only found on the Indonesian and Malaysian islands of Borneo, where their range is restricted to the northeast. First discovered in 1521 by Spanish explorers, the exact origins of this group of elephants are unknown. One theory was that these elephants were originally part of a captive group released by the Sultan of Sulu into the island, and eventually led to the population that we see there today. That claim was disputed, however, by mitochondrial DNA research indicating that the population of elephants there had been genetically separated from the Sunda Islands of Indonesia for 300,000 years, a separation long enough to qualify for at least subspeciation. But some scientists argue that rather than coming from, say, the Sumatran subspecies, these could instead have been members of an older Javan subspecies that went extinct, Elephas maximus sundaicus. They speculate then that these animals could have been transported by the Sultan in the 18th century after all, so it seems that both sides got to have their cake and eat it too, resulting in more support for a potential fourth subspecies. There are a few traits specific to Bornean elephants that set them apart. These include far straighter tusks, shorter trunks, and longer tails. They also have slightly rounder faces, something that makes the babies of these animals extremely cute. There's another aspect to their morphology that many argue set them apart from other Asian elephant subspecies, and that has to do with their size. Another name for these elephants is the Bornean pygmy elephant, given that these animals are smaller than their mainland cousins. And while they do on average seem to be smaller than the Indian and Sri Lankan elephants, they're actually more comparable in size to the Sumatran elephants than you might think. Elephants from the Malaysian state of Sabah have recorded skull dimensions very similar in size to those of their Sumatran counterparts. And while there haven't been too many measurements of these elephants, they have been pegged at around 2.9 meters or 9.5 feet at the shoulder, and have weights between 2,950 to 5,000 kilograms, or 6,000 to 11,000 pounds. These stats do line up with the view that many have of these being the smallest Asian elephant population, and as said before, consistently fall under heights and weights of the elephants from the Indian subcontinent. But again, you can see here that it's very comparable to the Sumatran elephants, with these upper weight estimates even exceeding those of Sumatranus. Of course, no discussion of elephants is complete without mentioning their conservation status. It's a part of these videos I dread discussing due to how depressing the topic is, but an important one nonetheless. All elephant species are endangered, with the forest elephant and Sumatran elephant being critically endangered. Their biggest threats range from poaching for their tusks or meat, as well as being killed as pest animals. The danger that these wonderful animals face is symptomatic of the dwindling boundaries between man and the rest of the natural world. But I believe that puts a nice bow on this discussion of modern elephants. Viewers of this channel may have recognized a lot of this info from a 2021 video I did on elephant evolution. That video was fairly popular, but I thought it'd be worth revisiting some of the taxa we mentioned there today in order to give them an even more comprehensive breakdown on their lives and histories. And of course, I've got to thank the following commenters here for asking me to cover this topic. But for those of you who haven't seen my evolution video, give it a watch after you're done with this one. It's a pretty good overview of the evolution of proboscideans as a whole. Regardless, thank you guys for watching. As you can probably tell, these longer-ish videos take a bit of time to complete, so I appreciate your guys' patience. I'm not sure what I'll cover next. I'm really hoping for a new Prehistoric Planet trailer to be released next week, and hopefully it'll even come out before I finish editing. But as usual, make sure to comment, like, and subscribe if you'd like to see more content like this. And if you've got a suggestion for a video you'd like me to make, sound off in the comments below. That's gonna be it for me today. I'll see you guys next time.